Hey everybody, I'm Jack Reedy with Future Pastimes, and I'm the designer of Firefly Misbehavin. And in this video, I wanted to talk about the amazing power of verse tokens. Now, each player in the game controls a different faction in Firefly, so either Serenity, the Alliance, Niska, or Eve's Down. And you have your own unique starting deck. You also start the game with one unique verse token out of a supply of a possible 6. And you have a unique way that your faction can earn a verse token, plus how you can spend them. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that because verse tokens are incredibly powerful, and I believe the key to really winning the game. So let's talk about how you earn the verse tokens and the different ways that they can be used. So Serenity, for instance, in order to earn a verse token, they need to have one untriggered character in their tableau. At least one. You can have more than one. And untriggered just means that they're not sideways because they've been used for an ability. And on top of that, they need to discard cards, whether they are from their hand or untriggered from their tableau, until they have discarded 4 power. And power, again, is the number on the bottom corner with the yellow background. It's part of what you need for the standard victory condition. And different cards have different amounts of power. So for Serenity, if they've got that character in play and they've discarded 4 power, they get a verse token, which they can do in this manner once on their turn. There are other ways to earn verse tokens. For instance, if you win a fight, whether you initiated it or not, earning a verse token is one of 3 possible rewards for winning that fight. The other 2 being draw a card from your deck or get a credit token. So on your turn, you could easily get 2 verse tokens, one through the normal way that you earn verse tokens per your faction card, and then winning a fight. The other factions will earn verse tokens in similar but not identical ways. So for instance, Niska's faction, they need one untriggered character in their command area of their tableau, and then they need to discard 1 card that has exactly 3 influence or 3 power. And they've got a few cards in their starting deck that have 3 influence or 3 power, so they're able to do that. Eve's Down needs to have 2 untriggered characters in their tableau, plus 2 assets, and they can be triggered or not. And then they just earn one. They don't have to discard anything. But the trouble for them is they only have 1 character in their starting deck, so they'll need to pick up another character. So they have the hardest time earning verse tokens to start with, but then they have the easiest time earning them because they don't have to discard anything in particular or at all. So once you've started earning the verse tokens, on your turn or while you are in a fight, you can spend verse tokens per your faction card in different ways. So, for instance, Serenity, if they spend 2 verse tokens, they get an additional activation. So on your turn, you always get 1 activation to start with, and this is a way that you could get additional ones. And activations let you play cards into your tableau, trigger cards for certain abilities, pick fights, or make deals. So activations are super important. They're the heart of the game. And being able to have additional ones is extremely powerful. For instance, if you're going for the standard victory condition of you have to have X amount of power in play in your tableau, say 11 in a 4-player game, being able to suddenly play 2, 3, or even 4 cards on one turn, and suddenly you are well over that threshold. And in fact, I like to, at a certain point, if I'm at 7 power, be able to play several cards in a row that catapult me over the requirement. That way, when I do inevitably get attacked, I can afford to lose a couple of cards out of my tableau, whether they get nabbed or dispatched, and I still have enough power to win the game. So that's really key. They can spend 2 to draw a card, and that can be extremely powerful in a fight. So if you don't have enough cards with fight in your hand and you're being attacked or thinking about picking a fight, you could spend the verse tokens to draw a card to find out what happens. An interesting thing about spending verse for that activation is, again, if you've got cards in your tableau with the activation requirement on them, this ability here requires an activation, but Zoe's ability, if she's in my tableau, I could spend 2 tokens for an activation, use that activation to trigger her ability. And this one lets me draw 2 cards, then discard 1 card from my hand. And it doesn't have to be one of the cards that I just drew. It can be some other card in my hand that's not going to be particularly useful in a fight, like common area. Can't use that in a fight. But here I can draw 2 cards, and maybe I'll pick up a couple of cards with fight, and now I'm ready to either pick a fight or defend something in my tableau. So that's going to be very handy. They can also spend 2 for an extra recruitment. So if they've got a lot of influence and there's a couple of cards out there that they really want to get, this is a way that they can let themselves do that. Normally you only have the 1 recruitment on your turn. Now all factions can do the last things, and that is retain and replay maneuver. So retain is especially important when you are defending, because the way it works is after a fight, before those cards in your display area go into your recycle, and after you get a reward, so you could choose to gain another verse token as your reward, but before you recycle those cards, you can spend verse tokens to put any of those cards into your hand rather than to your recycle. Now, it's important to note this doesn't work on supply cards. So if you played a Misbehave card, that's going to go back to the supply. There's nothing that can stop that, at least not with your verse tokens. But if I've played Zoe in that fight and I've played Malcolm in that fight, they both have the ability to be in a fight and they both have 2 power. And let's say it's a 3-player game. So 1 player attacked me to try to prevent me from winning, and I can expect the other player to do the same. I want these cards back in my hand so that I can use them for the next fight. So being able to spend a verse token per card to put it back into my hand is extremely useful. Another way that you can retain, however, is after a deal. And deal is one of the ways that you spend an activation. It's like recruitment. You're getting another card from the market or the supply to add to your deck. But with the deal, the card goes into your hand, not into your recycle when you get it. And after the deal is resolved, before your cards that you used in the deal and that are in your display area get recycled, you can spend verse tokens to retain those cards. And that is especially useful, again, if I've used Malcolm to make a deal, and I used his 2 influence, plus however many other cards and credits, I can spend the verse token to put Malcolm back into my hand. And let's say I made a deal for a card that also has influence. Well, I can use that card, and I can use Malcolm's influence for my recruitment action, which is a separate action. It's not, making a deal doesn't use up your recruitment, even though you're getting a card. So being able to retain those cards so that you can use them again on the same turn, especially useful. Finally, there's the replay maneuver. So maneuvers are cards that you can get in the supply, and they'll have the maneuver attribute. But what's interesting about maneuvers is that when you play one to the display area, before it returns to the supply, you can spend a verse token to replay that card. You're using it again, and you don't have to use the same effect. So let's take a look at an example here. The dart is a card that I can play to trigger a card in any player's tableau for no effect. So let's say that somebody wants to prevent me from bringing Malcolm into a fight. They could play that maneuver, and he's triggered. When triggered cards can't be brought into a fight. So it's triggered without effect. That means can't use this ability. He's just triggered so that he's out of commission. Now, somebody who's done that, they could spend a verse token to do the other effect on the dart, which is to gain 1 activation. So that's pretty handy as well. Let's say that they made a deal for a card that has fight, then they played this maneuver to gain an activation because they want to use that card in a fight immediately, and then they spend a verse token in order to basically hamstring a player to prevent them from bringing some of their fight cards that are in their tableau into that fight. And then if you've got more than 1 verse token, you could spend it again to replay that maneuver again. And you can use different effects each time that you replay a maneuver. So if you have all 6 of your verse tokens, you could basically get 7 uses out of a maneuver, which is crazy. It's really, really powerful. Some of the maneuvers are especially great. And this one, again, for the extra activations, normally it would cost Serenity 2 verse tokens to gain 1 activation. But if they play the dart, they can gain an activation. They can spend a verse token to gain a 2nd activation. They could spend another verse token for a 3rd activation. Use those activations to play more cards down into their tableau, and poof, they are in an unbeatable situation. You're able to win the game. It doesn't matter how many cards at this point that somebody tries to take away from you or dispatch, they're not going to be able to knock you down low enough to prevent you from winning. And that is how I try to win when I play Firefly Misbehavin. One of the last things that these verse tokens can be used for is in the market, you're going to have cards that have faction symbols in the top left corner. And let me grab one out of my little bag here. This is from the border deck. So right away here, we've got Wash. And Wash has the Serenity logo in his top corner. This means when your faction logo appears in there, it means that this card wants to be in your deck. They're predisposed to wanting to be in there. Wash clearly wants to be part of Serenity's crew. And that means that on Serenity's turn, they can spend verse tokens, essentially as influence. You're using it to discount the cost. So if I spend 1 verse token, he only costs 4 for influence or influence and credits if I'm trying to make a deal to get him. And you can spend multiple. So I could spend 3 to make him only cost 2. And that works for any card that has your faction's symbol in the corner. Kaylee as well. She wants to be part of Serenity. And here we've got Patience. She'd be happy to be joined Niska's crew. They're a little closer in disposition. I will point out here, Jane doesn't have any symbol. He doesn't care which crew he joins, as long as they pay. And that is one of the effects for Jane, is if he's in your tableau, you have to pay a credit at the start of your turn, otherwise he gets recycled. So I find that very thematic, but we'll see what other people think. So that's verse tokens. They can be used in a lot of different ways. Extremely powerful. The retain is very powerful, and the replay maneuvers can be ludicrously powerful. But just being able to do more things on your turn, additional activations, drawing cards. The Alliance, for instance, can use 2 verse tokens to put out a warrant. And they use one of those verse tokens as a marker, which they place on a character in someone else's tableau, and that character is frozen. It's very much like they've been triggered, and they stay that way until that player makes a deal to get the token off of there. And Eves Down can use tokens to steal credits. So yeah, it's a really powerful element to the game, not to be underestimated. So if you're playing Firefly Misbehavin, make sure that you are trying to figure out a good way for you to keep earning verse tokens on your turn. And if you've got a good system for earning them, then spend them to really improve your position in the game. That's it. Let me know if you have any other questions about that. And I look forward to seeing people play Firefly Misbehavin and hopefully enjoy it. Thanks for watching.